This episode of the Masonic Roundtable is brought to you by our good friends at Masonic Revival. John, you've done a lot of stuff with Brother Edgar Alejandro and Masonic Revival. What do you think about them?
What do I think about them? I think they are a fantastic group. But in fact, I really feel bad because I missed seeing Brother Edgar at the Grand Annual Communication of the Grand Lodge of Virginia down in Richmond this year. Last weekend, he was over there hawking some wares. I saw some pictures of him being shared on Facebook, and so I hope he had a good time, and I hope Virginia gave him a warm welcome as they did in previous years. So missed you, Edgar, but I think if you haven't gone over, check out his store at www.masonicrevival.com.
Yeah, no, I was sad I missed him as well, but he did me a solid, and he hooked up one of my buddies with a tie on my behalf. So Edgar's awesome, and his stuff is just some of the best Masonic apparel and style that you can get these days. So we're huge fans of Edgar and Masonic Revival here at the Masonic Roundtable.
Huge.
Isn't it time for a Masonic Revival, John?
All right. Welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments on the Facebook page for episode 237, Lodge Economics, or in the chat running along this YouTube video. So welcome all those watching live. And if you aren't watching live, we miss you. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia, as well as a couple other lodges and other jurisdictions, which will come in as a relevant topic tonight. But until then, we have a smaller group. Mike the intern, welcome.
Hey, how's it going tonight? Mike Hambrecht here from the Triandria Lodge number 780 in Rock Creek, Ohio. And I am the junior deacon-elect, and I believe still going to be the lodge education officer.
All right. Can't keep a good Leo down. Thank you, Mike. Last but not least, we might see Robert later. Jason Richards.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Jason Richards here, past master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, and member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C.
Multiple jurisdictions. Good stuff. So, I want to thank all of you for joining us at our new date, new time. We've only been doing this for about a month now, so thank you for the transition. It's been a smooth transition. And thank you for our patrons on Patreon. So if you want to go support the show and continue this thing we call Masonic education in the form of a nice fraternal conversation, head on over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable and help keep us going. And we actually have a couple of little perks for you, for those who have done it. Thank you in advance. And we are setting up some of, literally as we speak, some of the private Facebook groups and all that. So if you want to be part of that conversation, a little behind the scenes action, we'd love to have you join us over on patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable.
Yeah, not just behind the scenes action, but you'll actually help influence the topics that we talk about in the shows that we do. So it's a good chance for you to get involved and share in the creative process with us.
Vote early, vote often.
That's right.
Right. We already did that here in the U.S. a couple weeks ago, but you can vote some more. Vote like your vote matters.
And don't worry, we won't lose your votes.
We're still counting them. It's all
We're not Florida.
Juan, that's where Juan is tonight. He's actually counting some ballots. Juan sends his regrets. He's actually being honored at a governor's ball. So if you see him on Facebook or you see him next week, give him a little shout out and say congratulations. Tonight's episode is one that I had been kind of curious about for some time. As an amateur economist myself, I've been curious as to what are we creating, when we talk about where we're creating value in the fraternity, and basic economics, which you can kind of Google or see, you know, some like some YouTube videos to kind of understand. And my apologies in advance for those of you who are majors in economics or do some sort of economics for your profession. We're gonna mess this up horribly. So, but we want to get some of those basic economic principles out to the forefront and think about how do they apply to Freemasonry and how do they apply to lodges. Robert Johnson, how are you tonight? Why don't you say hi?
Hello. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Look good. You sound good. Hopefully you smell good.
Hey, well, I mean, I got a bourbon here, so I think that's okay.
Nice. We just got started. So from an economic perspective, there's a couple of different concepts that we want to talk about and see how they translate to the fraternity. Because if nothing else, lodge time is a tax of our time. We make choices to go to lodge versus other things, right? We're not going to get into different scenarios of like, are we choosing Netflix over lodge or anything like that? But those are actual conversations and concepts that we need to think about.
Opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost is a great one. Since you brought it up, Jason, let's talk about that. What would you mean by opportunity cost?
Opportunity cost is the economic term which loosely means the cost of doing something or procuring something. So everything we do in life is a trade-off. And the easiest way for us to see that is with our time. So we have 24 hours in the day. Everybody gets the same amount of time, but we don't use that time all the same different ways. So if you are here watching the Masonic Roundtable or listening to us on the podcast, we really appreciate that, because that's, you know, a 45 minutes to an hour of time where you aren't actually doing something else. And so the opportunity cost of listening or watching TMR is 45 minutes to an hour that you could be doing something else.
One of the best descriptions I've heard of opportunity cost is imagine there's two kids, and one kid stays inside all Saturday, 6 hours, playing video games. And the other kid comes in at the end of the day and says, "What have you been doing all day?" "Well, I've been playing video games for 6 hours." Like, you know, if you had just gotten a job, you know, and got a $10 an hour job, you could have had $60 by now. So basically you spent $60 playing video games all day. And the other kid's like, yeah, it sounds about right.
Yes, but the opportunity cost of having a $10 an hour job is you don't get to sit inside for 6 hours and play video games.
So which one is more important to you, right?
Whichever one allows you to win fake trophies that aren't real, but are real.
So are we talking Masonry or are we talking... Oh, burn.
Man, that was pretty savage, John. Nice.
Achievement unlocked. You've joined the grotto.
I was going to say, still glad I'm not a Scottish Rite Mason.
So opportunity cost is absolutely applicable in this case. Mike, can you think of another area where opportunity cost may come into effect in the fraternity?
Yeah, the opportunity to, you know, either go to lodge or, you know, this is where we get in tricky stuff, but or going to your child's concert or, you know, or baseball game or whatever it is, or, you know, those are opportunity costs and the decision needs to be made, obviously, either way there, you know. Or there's just the, you know, the opportunity to go to lodge versus sitting back and watching Netflix.
Mm-hmm. You know, another idea that I thought, just as you were saying that too, was when you join dependent bodies, and you can be an officer of dependent bodies, and you can be kind of committed and obligated to the dependent bodies. So then that's now taking place or usurping some of the time you may have for Blue Lodge, especially if they overlap on nights.
Oh yeah.
So then you are choosing which one's more valuable just within the fraternity.
So, I mean, for me, being master last year and being out doing masonry 3 to 4 nights a week, meant that the opportunity cost of doing that was I wasn't spending that time with my newborn son. So
Yeah.
I've been able to flip that on its head now, and I'm enjoying being home 7 nights a week or so. But that's another place where the opportunity cost of Masonry really comes into its own, because Masonry has a lot of time entailed with it if you're active.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
And I think the other day I had stolen a meme from the Texas Masons page, and it's basically, Lodge, we need to make an impact on our members' lives. Spends half the meeting reading minutes and bills. Members leave, and then the members are surprised, or the lodge is
Yes.
surprised. Yeah. And, I actually got a call from my brother, a fairly famous brother, later that day. And he says, what we need to do is, or he just calls me and he says, listen, that meme that you posted just got me thinking. And like, I rarely talk to this guy, really is an awesome guy. And I can't really tell you who he is, but he had some really choice words about, like, he's like, I'll rarely go to Lodge. And when I do, I'm so stoked to be there. And then when I get there, it's like Groundhog Day. He goes, I say, hey, it's good to see you. And the same old answers, oh, it's good to be seen above ground. We're better to be seen than viewed, and all
Better
the
to be seen than viewed.
And I started laughing, and I was dying, right? And then he goes in, and then I get all excited because, oh my gosh, this is going to pay off. I'm coming out. It's going to pay off because they got some education. And then it's like a guy pulls out some piece of paper and he just reads some basic thing about the emblems on an apron. And he's like, oh my gosh, shoot me in the face.
Tonight's educational minute, I'll be reading out of Carl Claudy's Old Tyler Talks.
Listen, nothing wrong with that. If at the end of it, you open it up
If we
to the
were in the
brothers to talk about it.
1950s, perhaps.
Maybe. But if you talked about it, right? Like, what is he saying or whatever? But the problem is you expect something, you're not getting it. And so when the guys leave like that, voting with your feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brent Morris says.
There you go.
Agree.
The next topic I want to shift to is the concept of supply and demand. So in economics, it's a basic set of intersection of two curves about the quantity of materials available for purchase, and then the demand, the want of customers to purchase it. And so as those two curves intersect, you'll find an optimum price point of where there's just enough supply to meet demand, and therefore that's how much people are willing to pay. Now, the real conundrum happens is when those curves are shifted. In other words, what happens when a supply is low, that the demand still might be high, but there's not many things to sell, the value increases of those products, right? So the poor example that I came up with in the green room was if that everyone in the world had one of these pens, it's not that valuable. But if I'm the only one in the world that has this exact pen, and
everybody wants one,
there's not a suitable replacement that you could convert to, and everybody wants one, this becomes now almost infinitely valuable. And so the real question I have for the fraternity then is, not only what does supply and demand look like in the fraternity, but more importantly, we do have a limited supply of something, and that is lodges in your state. So I know Robert has thought a lot about this as far as even crunching the numbers of lodges per state. How many are the right number of lodges per state, and how would you know? Robert?
Well, so essentially, what you can do is look at brief numbers that are in your own lodges. So take the total number of guys you have in your lodge, and then you're going to calculate the percentage that actually shows up to a meeting. Overall, we'll take the average of the average. We'll say 10%. So 10% is pretty good. If you've got 300 guys in your lodge, that means, you know, you've got a substantial amount coming. But like Waukegan Lodge, my own lodge, my mother lodge, doesn't have, we've got about 245 members and 15 members show up. So the math isn't totally at 10%. But if you took that 10% and you said, well, the optimum number of men in a lodge arbitrarily, let's say it's 20, 25 guys to have a solid lodge to do ritual who always show up. If every lodge had 25 to 30 guys, which would be like the 10%, you could drop off everybody else. And then basically what you would need is about 452 lodges in the United States. Right now, Illinois has 400 and some odd lodge. Yeah, in total. Illinois has 400 lodges in total, just in Illinois. So what does it look like? And of course, these numbers really are when I'm thinking about optimization, the proper number of people to get to know people, to drive those real legitimate connections, and all of that.
Well, then, Robert, you can't discount distance as well, because that's an additional factor. So how far is someone willing to travel to a lodge? So distance and population density overall factors into that as well.
Absolutely. And what we see in the craft, in large part, actually, you can look at, for instance, the SRICA or the SRIA, one council or body per state. John, what is it, 72 members?
Yeah, it's currently 72.
72 members per state. And here in Chicago, guess where the council is? I'm sorry, in Illinois, it's in Chicago. So members from Southern Illinois have to drive like hundreds of miles to go, and the dues are like $500. So like, it really depends that we're going to like, it's probably a good leeway into like driving value, right? Like, what are you getting for your money? But what's interesting is if you look at all that, it doesn't make sense to have so much. But like you talked about, Jason alluded to this population density. When Masonry was killing it in the northern Lake County area of Illinois, you know, we had we have the same amount of lodges we have, right? We have 7 lodges. Of those 7 lodges, if you started in the middle of the area, you could drive 20 minutes and get to any one of 7 different lodges, all of whom are pulling about the same number of guys per meeting. Some lodges have dualed up members just to get work done and all this stuff. So it brings it back home to John's point of this idea of supply and demand. In my view, we have too much supply. We don't have, and that drives down the demand. Nobody thinks it's special.
So that brings up a really good point too, of in Robert and my world, we even wrote a book on it. You can actually think about things in a pull-based system, right? That demand should, supply should meet demand, and that only increase supply when demand asks for it. So what would that look like? If for those of you who have read Observing the Craft by Andrew Hammer, he extols the virtues of the British system, where they tend to cap membership of lodges at around 30 members. And what a lodge of greater than 30 members is encouraged to do is to split off and form a new lodge. So in effect, think of it as a very elastic lodge system, where if it were very easy, granted all the bureaucracy and red tape, if it were very easy to fill up a lodge with 30 members and you have more demand than supply, cap that off, create a brand new lodge. And conversely, that the opposite also has to be true. You have to be willing to kill a lodge when, say, you only got 10 members. Great, you're now absorbed.
Masonry is such a bureaucracy, though. It's staggering how difficult it is for us to actually divest. We're still holding on to groups that were maybe relevant in the early 1900s, when everybody, but now we're holding on to this starving, appendant body or affiliate group that is just desperately holding on because we don't have the members we used to.
It's like they pick up, it's a lift and shift, what's known in the industry, right? Like with accounts or whatever, you lift up a group like the Shrine, you change the color, you give it a different charity, and boom, it's a new group. And Like, they just don't need to be around. It's a cool thing. Put them in a history book, remember it, but don't tax the existing membership. Like, pull them in 100 different directions. It just gets terrible.
Yeah, I mean, this thought experiment would be interesting if it was a truly demand-driven lodge system, where lodges were kind of forced to clone themselves and create a new culture after 30, and also would then also shrink.
It's like spinning up cloud servers.
Dude, you get out of my head, man.
It's like spinning up cloud servers. Yes.
Elastic compute cloud, baby. EC2. Because that's exactly what we're thinking about. For those who are non-nerds in the show, Amazon Web Services, which most of the internet runs on now, it measures utilization, and when a server is being used too much, it will clone itself, create a copy, and then route the traffic so it's spread even across the copy.
Yeah, it splits the traffic between the two new servers, and when that utilization starts to fall, it consolidates them. Yes.
Oh, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, let's do it. Let's create a system that's elastic lodge.
No, sorry, that's unbrotherly.
But it's optimization. It is optimization.
It is, and the way I think about that too is, if you have to, people are like, oh, well, think about the members. Think about the members. Here's the deal: when we think about the members, I think about the brothers that I see, that I love, and that I care about. And what do I care about most? Giving them the Masonic experience. And I'm sorry that in the last 20 years you've gotten used to like something that you didn't sign up for. Let me get you in a lodge, or bring two lodges together, and now you have the active participation on one and the few active on the other. And then maybe between the two active, you get one better body. It's just, like you said, it's optimization. It works. It's better. Anybody who comes to visit your lodge sees more activity. I don't know why it just doesn't make sense.
It's cold and heartless, Robert. You're not thinking about, what about that one guy?
I mean, I don't have anything to say about that. I mean, it's hard. I know it's cold. I'm sorry, but it's what we got to do.
Interesting.
That would be a great concept, guys. I love that. I had never thought about that before.
Yeah, it's just the spur of the moment. It's a great part of a live show. I love it. Next topic: sunk costs. So this is actually it's actually even called the sunk cost fallacy. And a good description of what a sunk cost is when you have to consider that sometimes it's not worth throwing more money at the problem, or it's not worth the investment anymore. One way to think of it is, when do you stop fixing your old car versus just buying a new one? Or another analogy is that used in the green room, let's think about you've paid for a really expensive dinner, 5-course meal, and by probably the end of the 3rd course, you're already full, and you feel, man, but I gotta eat the cheesecake because I paid for it, so I have to hurt myself to really enjoy it, because I got to get my money's worth.
And it's cheesecake.
Oh, it's cheesecake. So the cold-hearted economist would say, you've already received your value by the 3rd course. You're actually creating a negative value by making yourself in pain and make you hit the can later if you go further. So it's wiser, it's more optimal for you to say, you know what, I'm good, even though you've already prepared the food. We've reached the value limit right here.
Well, and that comes right into play with the law of diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you get of something, the less intrinsic value it has, until it reaches 0, or in the case of too much pizza and beer, negative, right? So if you have, lodge one night a month is good. I really wish it could be, 3 nights a month. That'd be awesome. Every week, okay. 3, 4, 5 nights a week, there's a diminishing return for each instantiation of that lodge meeting, to the point where my wife gets really mad at me and I suffer as a result and enter into a negative return on my Masonic obligation.
Well said. Well said. Yep. So Mike, what would you do in the case of applying this sunk cost decision-making process in your fraternal experience? When would be some scenarios that you would say, I'm good, I've had enough?
Well, like obviously if you've spent years paying your dues to a lodge and you're not getting anywhere, you're not getting more education. You're spending all the time listening to minutes. And I hate to put it this way, but you're bored. If you've hit that point that you're bored, you need to take a look at, do I step out of this or do I find another lodge? And and there's that emotional side of it being your mother lodge, do you leave, or do you start trying to change the one you're in? Really work to do it, that's what you have to think about. But most of the time it's really, I have to leave.
So what's funny about what you just said, Mike, is that normally when we're talking about this idea, it's when you received a perceived value of something and you almost flipped it. It's like when I've had enough of something bad. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
And so it feels almost like if I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, I'll start it. It's almost like, okay, I'm going to pay $120 a year. Now, if we want to look at something in terms of intrinsically good at first, right, before you get to a crotchety old jerk like myself, like I'm expecting something good.
You're always a crotchety jerk.
Yeah. No. I'm going to go and I'm going to go, wow, I've gotten so much out of this lodge. This is so great. Like, there's no reason to ever stop really going, right? Because you're getting more than your perceived value. So the only way I think it really does work is the way you're looking at it, Mike, is to say, how much for $120, here's the amount of BS I'm willing to put up with, or here's the lack of content I'm willing to put up with for $120.
That's right. And that's kind of what that's the perception of sunk cost fallacy that I come up with, is that
I agree with you.
You continue to pour money into, let's say the car that, you've had years of great success with this car, but now it's actually dying on you. Now is it time to sell it, trash it, whatever, and replace it? Which is the same thing here, is that, I've been dumping money into this lodge, which, obviously provided you value at the beginning, even if it wasn't in the, the lodge education as I was talking about there, but there was something that you got out of it no matter what. And that's where the emotions come into it. But then, you've put more years into it and all of a sudden you're like, I'm bored with this place, and nothing's changing. Nothing's getting better.
You said the car analogy, but except in Masonry, it's not like you get to go out and buy a new car. You just have to go get another old, gross car.
That brings up a point. There's transference, right? So you could say you can vote with your dues. So if this were a true free market model of lodges creating value, you could more fluidly say, I'm demitting and I'm going over to this lodge. And then it sends a signal, the usual emotional reaction that I would expect to hear, because I've heard it in other ways, and people say, oh, this, it was even brought up in the YouTube chat today. Oh, I think you should introduce more education, Worshipful. Congratulations, you're now the education committee, and present some topics.
Absolutely, you go do that.
Yes. So it's the emotional reaction that I have heard other members say is, well, you need to go fix it. If you're not finding value, you need to create the value. Well, what if the lodge next door is already creating that value and has active members? It's still not worth it to try to raise up something that's broken where you're instantly can transfer over. You're already a Master Mason. You can not only visit, but then become a dues paying member and actually get more value by transferring. So that's something to think about, that there should be more fluidity in voting with your dues to go to lodges that work. I'm not saying don't make your lodge better, but I am saying, all things being equal, shouldn't we send some stronger signals with membership to say, I'm going to reinforce and strengthen a lodge that's doing well at the cost of a lodge that's not doing so well.
Here's a question for you, John. What if that lodge that isn't doing well owns their own building? It's a beautiful historic lodge building. If it were to close down, Chris Hodap would cry and write about it on his blog.
Something about arson, but that's not a really it's not a nice thing to say.
So, lodge building, sunk cost, yes or no?
Oh, holy smokes! If you can't maintain it, it's definitely sunk cost. That's a really good question, Jason.
Well, it was one of our friends on the YouTube chat asked it.
Wow. Good for you guys.
That's what they have historical societies for.
Thank you, Todd. That was a good question.
So, and it's interesting because Todd brought up the good point. It's like had a lodge waited a couple of years or asked somebody else for help, that lodge might have survived. But what was the opportunity cost of that lodge surviving if it burdened the rest of the craft or guilted a bunch of Masons into spending more time, more money, etc., when they wouldn't have? A lot of how Masonry survives these days is through guilt. Hey, save the clock tower, right, RJ?
Hey, yeah. Yeah.
So, for me, it's, if it's creating value and if it's got a user base and it's flourishing, then awesome. But if it's not creating value, I hate to be a stoic about it, but if it's not creating value, it's a burden on the craft. And following basic economic principles, if the demand doesn't match the supply needs to go down in order to reach equilibrium.
Totally true. And I want to, John, you said something a few minutes ago about, a member who says, well, if you're not getting the value that you want, then you need to create that value. But then you can go back to supply and demand. I'm not going to work. Here's a great example. I put out a newsletter for 2 years or 3 years as a secretary, 2 years as a secretary. And I got to use use my analytics so I could see. I sent that thing out to 350 people every month. It had like 15 opens. So in that instance, I'm trying to do something better, but the demand isn't there. So I just quit.
And how missed was it?
I had like 2 guys go, oh.
Right. 2 guys out of 300 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep. So there you go. The value that you created was not enough value to them, so it was wise to not follow a sunk cost pattern and just say, time to end it.
Yeah, but isn't there something else with sunk cost that we call like objective opinion or subjective opinion based on emotion? I think there's a law that is regarded within the sunk cost also.
Right. It is kind of the opposite of opportunity cost, but in the sense of that people will emotionally state things. For example, if it's your mother lodge, you will now act irrationally, from an economic perspective, and using that term as defined in the economics model, that you are now an irrational actor and you're not in your best interests, but you are now acting called below the neck. You're not thinking logically. You're not thinking with your heart. And you're saying, oh, but it's my mother lodge. I feel like I owe them something. I have a guilt trip, a guilt complex.
What you're talking about there is commitment bias. And it's the irrational escalation of commitment. Yep. So it's the other side of the coin with sunk cost fallacy.
Yep. Okay, next topic is it's a multi-layered one, so I want you to kind of go with me on this experiment here. A lot of things we've alluded to tonight is on the concept of value, meaning, are we getting the benefit for the cost that we're incurring? So yes, I'm alluding to a cost-benefit ratio. Now, the costs in the fraternal sense would be your dues and time, and the benefit could be a myriad of factors. But we do know that when you join Freemasonry, you are entitled to a set of rights and benefits for said costs, for said dues. So I'm going to kind of build up a couple of different scenarios here. If you are looking strictly within your jurisdiction, and for those in the United States, it would be kind of within your state Grand Lodge. The benefit of joining once you become a Master Mason is you can travel to other lodges, you can have Masonic funerals, you're entitled to a couple other things like that. So the outcome is the same. The benefits that you get as a Master Mason are the same whether you join a $1,200 a year lodge or a $10 a year lodge, because what do we say? That you're all on the level once you become a Master Mason.
I mean, we know that doesn't play out in practicality, but yes, idealistically, sure.
So in general, you're entitled to travel to other lodges and everything. So you could be you could have joined the cheapest lodge in your state, and you are entitled that you should be have the access to travel to even the most expensive lodge in that state, depending on other scenarios and other factors. So if everyone if there were 300 of these in your state and you get the same benefit, wouldn't it be in your best interest to shop around and join the lodge with the lowest dues? We do this in all of our normal commerce things. So if I see you wearing a shirt and I want that same shirt and I can find it for half price online, I'm going to buy it half price online, get it 2-day Amazon Prime. I'm not going to pay twice if I know that I can get that same shirt for half the price. So why don't we do that for lodges? Thoughts?
So my initial thought on this is I immediately started thinking about a pen. Like, I have this free pen that my bank gave me, but it's not a Mont Blanc, is it? But they do the same thing. So I think what we have to look at is nuances, style, and a perceived value for what you're getting. As far as lodges go, we're my newest venture outright is, I don't really talk about it much, but we're under dispensation. I'm no longer the secretary of Waukegan. I'm a secretary at a new lodge that we're in the process of chartering, and we faced a lot of criticism because we had to submit bylaws, and people said we're a millionaire's lodge. It's like, well, I'm so glad that you think that I'm a millionaire. I must be so amazing, at giving you this vision of myself. But no, the thing is that we're fairly expensive, and I would say that what somebody's getting. So a grand officer asked us, well, what's stopping a guy from joining a $25 a year lodge and just coming to every single one of your meetings?
Exactly.
And we said, well, really nothing, except that everybody in the room is going to probably look at you like you're a freeloader, because of the programming that we're putting on costs a lot of money to do. And our members are spending a lot of money out of pocket to put that on. So there's a significant difference there too, which is like you talked about. I just alluded to this perceived value, but also there's the brotherly thing to do. Like, I would not like it if somebody just kept on coming to my lodge meetings and whatever. The appropriate thing to do would be to approach that brother and say, you love this. We love having you here. Really, join.
Right. So this is really no different. Let me try to internalize that in the sense of this is no different than someone going to a lodge dinner and just eating the dinner and not contributing into the donation bucket, right? That's one way to think of it. Is there anything wrong with that? No, it was paid for by the lodge usually, and that's just kind of the incurred costs that go.
Green beans are the rights and benefits of a Freemason.
So, but is it brotherly? Is it ethical? Is it morally right to do that on a repeated basis? Hey, I forgot my wallet. That's one thing. I do it, one meeting a month for the whole year. Now you're actually exploiting the fraternity. And so if the lodge has made a conscious decision to not serve just green beans, but a full agape board, with it comes at a high cost, it's creating high value for its members, then although you may be entitled as a Master Mason to travel, the catch is, and at least in Virginia, I don't know how it is in other jurisdictions, the worshipful master can deny someone access. I've heard of scenarios where they've done that for the right fraternal reasons, right? That this is the way our lodge does things, and we heard the expectations clearly posted on our website, so you can't claim ignorance. This is kind of the entry criteria. This is the cost of entry. And if you're not willing to go with that, there are lots of other lodges in this district you can go visit, but not here, not tonight. So that's one way that you could offset that, is to because you will in effect reward freeloaders, to your point, to use that term loosely, that someone could take advantage of this fraternal bond in the sake of the costing the lodge an impact to their value they're creating. Yep. So my next follow-on question to that is, if the one of the benefits of a Master Mason is to travel. Now, we talked about staying within your state, and that's one thing. So the cold economic answer would be join or transfer your membership to the lodge with the cheapest dues, because then you are a Master Mason in that state, and you can then visit all the other lodges. In Virginia, at least, the thing that you don't get by not being a member of that lodge is the ability to hold office or vote for members to join that lodge. That's it. So if you have no interest in being an officer or balloting, then there's, everything else is the same. Everything else is equal. So what happens if now you want to cross to other jurisdictions? Because that is one of the benefits as a Freemason, is that you can travel to other jurisdictions as well. Now we get into the land of recognition. Okay. Well, if you say we're traveled a lot for work, but you joined a jurisdiction just because it's your home state that you live in, and it only recognizes a few other states, now your benefit of a Master Mason is now severely limited by the recognition options of your Grand Lodge. What would you do in that scenario? How could you maximize your benefits for the cost that you're incurring? Thoughts? I have some ideas. I want to hear
get a PO box.
That's funny.
In Oklahoma, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd get a PO box in Oklahoma. That's what I do.
Right. How would you think through a more creative solution in order to expand your benefit of a Master Mason to travel?
Probably start off with getting a dual membership in a different jurisdiction, and see about changing primary lodge in that case. See if that'll work.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So what we're talking about here is if some lodges allow plural membership, some Grand Lodges. So if you're a member of one state, you may be able to be a member of a different state as long as they're recognized.
Mhm.
And then now, if State A, the state you became a member in, only recognizes, I'm making up this number, 10 Grand Lodges. And State B, one of those 10, recognizes 50 other lodges, Grand Lodges. Well, now your ability to travel has now been opened up to you. All within, there's a little bit of decorum there because you still should follow your mother Grand Lodge's rules and jurisdictions. They don't really track it. I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying you now have options ahead of you. So how could you then maximize that scenario of joining or becoming a plural member with another jurisdiction?
And, but the fact that you can investigate, because now that you're already a member, you can investigate to find out, which ones within your recognized scope to begin with have the greater recognitions also.
Oh, so if you look at a handy book right here called The List of Lodges Masonic.
Or go on Amity.
Or go on the Amity app we talked about earlier. This lists not only every lodge and Grand Lodge that is kind of agreed upon by the Conference of Grand Masters of North America, but at the bottom of every single Grand Lodge, they say this Grand Lodge recognizes these other Grand Lodges. So you could quantify the benefits of joining those other Grand Lodges were you able to do plural membership.
The benefits for the purpose of travel.
So
this is only one benefit we're talking about that
one
plays
variable.
into the entire.
We're optimizing
equation.
one variable only. Thank you.
Yes.
Also, you should. I mean, I really think it should be stated that in this particular case, because we're using it as an example, the right of visitation is questionable.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say that.
Go on.
Well, like it's not. I mean, it's your right to try to go.
Right.
But in almost any jurisdiction, any Mason within the lodge can object to you being admitted, and you don't get admitted.
Yeah. So in Virginia, it is the right of the worshipful master to deny membership to anyone. He rules and governs his lodge, and if you show up and you're like, "Let me in, bros. I'm entitled," the worshipful master, for whatever reason, can say, "Not tonight, brother."
There are instances here in lodges that I've been at where I was not a member, and I was there with, how do I say this? I was there with people that have carte blanche to do whatever they want in a state because of the jurisdiction, and have been asked to leave with those people because we're not members of the lodge. Mm-hmm. Because that lodge has a particular practice that they want to do, and I love that. And they respect their membership enough to ask everybody else to leave. It's a private time for them.
Well, and I've visited a lodge where I was asked to leave during the business meeting because they wanted to discuss business for lodge members only. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad reason.
Okay.
Right.
Would have been nice to have known that beforehand, but cool. Ultimately, the lodge has to act in the best interest of the lodge, and the master has both the authority and the responsibility to do so.
Right.
Okay, so just to kind of put a bow on that, one thing that if you're interested in that is to kind of go look through this list of lodges Masonic and see if there are options for you to kind of shop around. We encourage, and we've talked about this in other previous episodes, about we encourage anyone who's interested in joining Masonry to shop around to lodges. But once you become a member, you're not stuck. You can apply some of these economic concepts to your fraternal experience after joining. And so don't feel like you have a sunk cost fallacy to stay where you are. And not get around. And when you are looking for value, you may find that there are options where you can exploit the benefits into the greatest optimization for the greatest fraternal experience, all in the name of of the fraternal experience we know as Freemasonry. We could talk a lot more, but I think this is the time where we should start wrapping things up. Been a great conversation on the YouTube chat. I'll hand it off to Jason to start off our shameless plugs, final thoughts, and anything that jumped out at the YouTube chat tonight.
So yeah, great discussion. We were able to call out a couple great questions in the YouTube chat. So for everybody who is watching along with us and contributing, you guys really are adding a ton to, guys and gals are adding a ton to our discussion tonight. So thank you so much for doing that. We love you all, and we're very happy that you stick with us watching live week after week, because it just adds so much to our own conversations. So we represent the four to 6 or 7 jurisdictions on the show with our dual memberships and whatnot, but with you all participating, that jumps up to 50 jurisdictions, and it's awesome. So thank you so much for doing that. This was a great show. I love talking economics. I love nerding out on economics. One thing I wanted to tell everybody was, this was a show about the economic principles and the application of economic principles, and some people get really uncomfortable with that because it takes the emotion out of the subject matter. So the idea of going, but we've got that building, or, well, wait, would you really deny a brother who was too poor to be able to pay? No, I mean, it's one of those things where yes, you can't follow straight economics all the time, but for the purposes of this show, this was the angle that we wanted to convey. So just make sure you're being brotherly in your application of economic principles. But it's similar to John or Robert's book, It's Business Time. It's an adaptation or an adaptation of certain principles to your Masonic experience. It's not a hostile takeover that takes all the emotion out of it, as it were. So keep that in mind. Some of the comments I was making on the YouTube chat were playing devil's advocate from an economic standpoint. So, but thanks so much for everybody for watching with us and having fun alongside of us. Go ahead and check out our Patreon page. We've got some cool stuff coming down the pipes here in the next week or two for those of you who have already signed up. So we're excited to have you with us on this part of the journey, and I'll hit it back over to you, John.
Thank you very much. Mike, the intern, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
So yeah, I love having these discussions about economics and whatnot, because it, brings up some valid points about why we choose to stick with some of our lodges, why we don't, why we, what lodges need to do to draw in people more, what they need to do to make sure they stay alive. And it actually goes right back to each of us to also sit back and say, look, we all need to evaluate why we're at these lodges sometimes too, and why we're members of this body or that body, and do we want to continue, and what is it we're getting, and what is it we're paying for, and does that equal what we expect? So anyway, that's kind of where I feel about it. Everyone, evaluate what you're doing, take a look around you, see what, you never know, you may find better. Don't always, it's a nice thing, obviously, if you could go for the cheapest lodge in your state and be able to travel to more jurisdictions. But honestly, the other side to it might be you might be better off paying the most expensive lodge in your state and going to very few jurisdictions to travel. So it's in what you're looking for.
Great observation. Very good point. Okay, Robert, what say you?
I really, really can't stress what Jason said enough. Again, this is about economics, not about people. Brother Chris Matty was in the chat. He's like, some brothers can't afford stuff. Would you turn them away? And like Jason said, no, we'll find a way to find equilibrium between bringing justice to the element, right? Like, so I think that's important. But also, what's really important to say about a lot of the things that we're talking about, they sound like these highbrow, you know, crazy. You're just going to study in college or whatever, but really, it's basic checks and balances. We have a real problem with of understanding sometimes, really just the idea of, I've got $40 in my checking account, I can't go do this thing today, or whatever that is, and it's like with lodges, we want to operate this lodge, we have to dig into the charities or whatever, we're talking about both the real deal money economics, but in this episode I think we tackled probably a little bit more on the holistic side of the economics, your personal subjective opinions on where you are, what you're getting. And I still feel like you should vote with your feet. If you don't like what you're getting, then maintain your memberships while you scope some other lodges and do the right thing, fulfill your obligations. Don't go leaving a lodge where you're the senior or junior warden or a deacon or something. Don't walk out on them, because then you're just causing more problems. Finish out your commitments, be a man, and when the time comes, say, I have to step out, and do the right thing. The other thing is that really think about your value. I can't stress that enough. For a long time, that's why I started a podcast. I wasn't getting education, and then education around the nation blew up as Mason's Got a Voice, whether that was on blogs or podcasts, or we just found each other in secret groups on Facebook or open groups. And we found a voice, and that kind of filled the gap in the value. And we were getting better masonry online than we were getting in our lodges. And if that's the case, then start a lodge, or go to a new lodge, or find enough guys in your own lodge to do something, find value in. And if you can't do any of that, keep listening to TMR. Keep listening to,
regardless of what else we've ever said on the show, keep listening to TMR.
Yeah, keep listening, keep watching. But in seriousness, this is one of the, I think all of our collective Masonic experiences are so much better from sharing, and then getting the amazing feedback, both in the side running chat on YouTube. We didn't have that forever. That's a recent development, and it's added so much great context and feelings and perceptions that we normally wouldn't have had. So thank you for engaging that way. I want to say thanks to everybody out there for hooking it up and really coming together and donating. I did a charity for my birthday thing on Facebook. We got a week left, and my goal was to raise $200 for the House of the Temple, and we were at $400 already. So we got a whole week left. So if you see me, if you're friends or buddies with me on Facebook, consider donating a couple dollars to that. It all goes to the House of the Temple for the Scottish Rite, to basically preserve that building.
Speaking of sunk cost fallacies and buildings that are impossible to maintain.
That building is impossible to maintain. I'm not going to lie, but this is me saying I have an emotional attachment. Everybody says that the library at Alexandria, if you think about that and you still get mad, you must be a nerd. They've got an incredible library there that just can't go away. And I'm going to explore the possibilities of asking, can that money be earmarked to take care of the books or whatever? So just know that I can't guarantee it, but that's what I'm going to look for. And then thanks for everybody for picking up the new producer's pin from WCY. I have to give a large shout out to, of course, Edgar Alejandro for manufacturing those and helping me out with that, but also to Jason Richards. You created a killer design, friend, and people love it. So, yep. So thank you guys. Jason Richards, foremost expert in pin creation.
Hey, I've got a new one for folks who are Patreons. Those are in work, and then I've got another new one coming out for folks who want to come to the on June 15th of 2019 in Northern Virginia. So you guys will get a pin that's unlike anything I've ever done before.
super cool. So thank you guys.
Cool. Thanks. Attention, Scottish Rite Masons. You should see in your mailbox very shortly the November-December issue of the Scottish Rite Journal for at least the Southern jurisdiction, entitled Masonic Frame Job. But if you look all the way in the back, there's a nice little book review section with dun, da, 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 It's Business Time reviewed on there. So we knew they were going to review it, but we didn't know what they were going to say. So we were pleasantly surprised with the review. Check out an unbiased, we swear, checks in the mail, with an unbiased review of It's Business Time. And so you have at least another data point. So I think that we're very honored to have been reviewed in the journal for the Scottish Rite, and we hope that you will, of course, check out the book because we are getting feedback that people are finding value. And by the way, here in Virginia, we're just a couple short weeks away from the new officer lines being elected and installed, and so we feel that these are some tools in our book that can help your officers be more awesome and help run their lodge more efficiently.
6, count them. 6 people came to us and bought a complete set when we were in some various speaking engagements. Bought entire complete sets for their Grand Lodge officers and other officers. So
I was going to say, how can you buy a complete set of just one book? But thank you.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, thanks. I sorry. Yeah, it was awesome. I couldn't believe it. It was really cool.
Yep, very cool. This has been great. Enjoy the conversation. Enjoyed the chat on the side. What do you think of Lodge economics? Go share some more thoughts on the Facebook group or on the Patreon groups that will be coming out soon. So thank you very much for watching. See you next week, and keep searching for more light.